Good morning, everybody. It's, of course, Jillian. Every single day, it's Jillian. I always say the same thing, but it's my usual opening. So, but anyways, so just a real brief situational awareness. Whoo, last night, my dog was doing the zoomies. And yeah, I know I don't give her like a lot of walks and exercise because she's not really into. If I go and run her around, yeah, I could do that, but it's like we have a lot of dogs in our neighborhood and a lot of weird people in the neighborhood, so I just kind of keep myself in a nice little bubble and not deal with too many people. So she runs around the yard when she wants to and does the zoomies in the backyard. But last night, a lot of energy. So I've been up like at 1 and 2, and then I went back to sleep for a couple hours. But still, but it's just the energy of the universe. So it is what it is. But anyways, I woke up with this thought in my mind. Like sometimes there's things that run through my mind, like a computer running, and even though the computer's asleep, it's still going through its stuff. And so just think of yourself as like a computer and you have stuff running through your mind, but you still can sleep at the same time. But as you wake up, you are conscious of the computer running through your mind. And so I woke up with this thing in my head where it says, give people the choice. Give people the choice. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's so true. Give people the choice. But what does that mean? Because I've been really demonizing death, right? I've been really demonizing death. And of course, nobody wants to die. I mean, everybody is scared to die. Like everybody is. Even those that say, oh, I don't want to take the vaccine. People are like, oh, you shouldn't be afraid of the virus. Don't be afraid to die. You should live your life. And then you're like, well, then they're recommending a vaccine. So why don't you take the vaccine? Because they said that it will save your life. They're like, no, I'm not taking the vaccine because it might kill me. And I'm just like, okay, who's afraid of death here? I think we both are. So I don't want to hear anyone saying, oh, I'm not afraid to die. Go live your life. And then be afraid of a vaccine. Because if it was truly something deadly, everyone that has taken it would be dead by now. Okay, so let's dispense with that misnomer about the vaccines. It's not deadly, but people don't understand death. And that's what the crux of it. Because I'm watching CNN and I'm watching about the firemen that don't want the mandates, that don't want to deal with the mandates. And so many of them either called in sick or they're on a protest or something. And so it's going to really take down the efficacy of the fire department when you are missing 23,000, 9,000 firemen that used to be now at your beck and call, and it'll take a lot longer to get to you. And so just so you know, on both sides of it, this is all by design, okay? Because you never understood death. You never really understood what life was. See, we came into this world thinking that this was like you're supposed to live. Well, yeah, you're supposed to live. But you didn't realize that you're one of many, many, many people that also need to be scaled down. That needs to be controlled. That needs to be not too prolific. That there at some point there had to be I don't know, what would you call it? There had to be some kind of balancing force. And so with the JJ mentality, okay, when you have a lot of candida, people were turning to the antibiotics. So they were genociding parts of themselves or a lot of themselves because they didn't want to deal with the infection. Okay, so when you weren't on the JJ, you were doing antibiotics left and right. Those that are on the JJ now. Now you realize that you don't want to do antibiotics because that's anti-life. You are destroying yourself at the micro level, and you will keep destroying yourself progressively until there's nothing left. And that's where cancer comes in. So now you realize that JJ is a cure. Okay, so the cures are stays of execution. Now, the antibiotics can be looked at as a cure because it's a stay of execution if you have more life than death in your body. But then that, again, is like the JJ mentality. If you're too much in a cured state, and you don't have as much life than you do not life, then being in a cured state, the environment is going to cannibalize you. And so doing so much of a cure, whether it's jelly juice or something on the market that's being advertised, even though it's antibiotic, it still will do the same thing. The environment and also what you're doing is going to cannibalize you. And so you realize now, okay, so what is the deal here? All right. You have to give life to life, but the life that you're giving life to also has to release. And I had a, hold on. Oh, my nose. And so even though you're in a cured state, okay? Oops, hold on, sorry. Your body is still releasing stuff that it doesn't need. So it's still maintaining balance, only you're not dying in the process. The little microbes in your body that are viruses, parasites, protozoa, proteins, fungus, and bacteria are being released, and they're probably protesting on their way out the door. But you're ignoring that. You don't care because you're still living. You are like Earth. Just pretend you're Earth and you have percentages of your body that's overgrown and it's causing glitches in the mainframe of your body. And so you need to either quell the energy or get rid of it altogether if that is your purview. And so that way you can still maintain life. Well, that's our medical system, is instead of curing you and then allowing you to live and then releasing, they are putting you in an antibiotic state and also telling you that it's okay. Antibiotic state means that they're curing you from the excess of life, like cancer or whatever, but they're also telling you that you must die someday too. So people don't understand what death is. They think this is what people think. And this is how I know, because I ask everybody what they think death is. And they tell me, oh, it's something that you're supposed to happen, but you want to happen at your request or what you think is natural. So many people are afraid of premature death. If they're going to die, they want it to be what they perceive as natural, not do something that would be potentially a catalyst. So if you think getting exposed to a virus without a vaccine is a catalyst to your death, you're going to go get the vaccine. Okay? So you have to understand that side of the story. If you think the vaccine is poisonous, then you're still afraid to die. So even though you're like, oh, why are you so afraid of the virus and afraid of death and demonizing someone that's taking the vaccine? But if you're afraid to die and you think the vaccine is poisonous, you're not going to take the vaccine, but you're still afraid of death, not realizing that the virus is just as powerful and you would die anyways. And so the fear of both taking the vaccine and not taking the vaccine, the fear of the virus or trying to sequester yourself in some hermetically sealed environment, is still ending up that people are dying. And so then it's like, okay, then the whole thing with the vaccines being the savior and the Satan is still getting the job done of scaling down the population without turning to World War II tactics, without turning to tactics that have been demonized in history, that you can't even give any kind of credibility to some of the leaders from back then, because it's so heinous and so horrific that no credibility is due. And so then you're like, okay, so they don't want to repeat the past, but they have allowed so many people to procreate, like so many. I mean, 7 billion people. Now you're saying, well, that's not overpopulation. When you think about 7 billion people, and we all have our own little frame of reference of our lives, so we don't see the bigger picture. Maybe there are the powers that be that are rich enough in their jets to see the bigger picture, but then you don't know how influenced they are. You don't know what's driving their intentions or narrative, so everyone speculates. But when you think about how many people are needing so many resources, and there's so many people who are also taking advantage of the resources, even in San Francisco, where I used to live back in 2000, before it turned into this horrible place because of all the thievery. The people are getting beat up. They're getting, attacked. I mean, there are people that are just stealing stuff and they're not giving back. There are people that are so sick, bless their heart. I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I just mean that in a more of like a, I'm sorry, I'm giving you a little bit of empathy, sympathy. But they're just utilizing resources and they're not giving back. But you're like, well, they gave their time. Okay, yeah, they probably did. But our society is supposed to be where when you're taking something, you got to give something back. There's a quid pro quo in all of the equal balance or equal exchanges of energy. Not everything's 100% equal. But when you have so many people that are not giving back more than they're taking, and it's a lot of people, then you look at what is being destroyed in the process of finding new resources to replenish. And then of course this thing with the climate change, we're like, oh, that's all propaganda. It's the green machine that's trying to control everybody. And you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I mean, in my world, what's my green machine? Well, I don't go and buy shit that I don't need. I don't go shop. I don't do shopping sprees. I don't buy cheap Chinese goods. I am very conservative in just what I do. I turn off lights. I mean, my husband's like, well, that doesn't really save anything because either the amount of energy and turn the light on to power up takes more energy than leaving it on continuously. I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna argue with him, but I live a very conservative, very minimalist lifestyle, and I try to give people choices and opportunities, and then I'm also helping myself, and so everything around me and myself is gaining benefit just from my existence. And that's the key thing about life, is that is everything around you gaining benefit from your existence. And so when there's a lot more people who are not out there giving everyone benefit of their existence, when you think about it, okay, then what does this society do? Keep creating more agencies and more resources to deal with those that just can't seem to get it together. And so you can't, again, let's say morals and do what happened in World War II. You can't just go and just genocide, people. And so then there's the psychological operations that have to come into play, because you want people to make the choice themselves. And so fear, all the different arguments around everything. I mean, when you have viruses, parasites, protozoa, proteins, fungus, and bacteria, and like 100 and something or whatever elements on the periodic tables, and you have so many different companies that make your food and so many different medicinal and holistic stuff, you now have a charcuterie board of choices to go and blame why somebody died. And so then, even though people need to pass away because of the amount of resource being taken up more than are being regenerated, then you can play those psychological games of, well, the vaccines are at the fault, or this GMO food's at fault, the water's at fault, Bill Gates is at fault, Bezos is at fault. I mean, there is a slew of things people can blame why people die, but they accepted death before. But who do they blame? I mean, when you die from a heart attack, that's because you were exposed to a virus and you had a lot of antibodies that coagulated, that had glitchy programming, and were either trying to, create antibodies to mitigate that viral energy, and so it clogged up the arteries and capillaries, and the person had a heart attack and died from it, or not enough antibodies. Well, no, not enough. No, either an antibody would be produced to either mitigate that foreign attack, or antibodies are produced to go and regenerate at an exponential level. So when you get exposed to a virus with no mRNA programming to stop that viral energy or stop the proteins from replicating, then your body is going to take on the programming and then agonist antibodies that are going to regenerate, causing you to be hungry. Maybe your sugar is going to drop and you're going to be feeding yourself. Not everybody knows how to do that. So no matter what, it's like the antibodies in your system, your immune system, is going to determine your life and your death, and the health of your immune system is going to determine your life and your death. And so even before the vaccines, forget the vaccines, your immune system was determining and then not understanding how to balance out your microbiome. So infection was always, well, back in the Middle Ages, infection, war, famine, and of course disease. But what was disease? It was infection, right? And people were using antibiotics, they're using poisons, or they were doing stuff. And finally, I guess, yeah, there was a safer antibiotic that either Jonas Salk or other people, penicillin and stuff, invented that then allowed so much proliferation and then an organized society. And so that's what you see is an organized society, so much proliferation. But even if you took everyone out of the cities and put them out in the countries, it's like taking a bunch of of um of goats and putting them out to pasture in a small little pasture. They're going to eat up all the resources because you still have to have infrastructure for every single human that is in the city that go way out in the country. What are they going to live on? What animals are going to live on? You're going to have agriculture. I mean, yeah, we have enough people for 7 billion, but when you have enough people, every single person requires infrastructure. Not everybody wants to live off, they can't live off the land because you still have to require water, seeds, a place to go to the bathroom. You would have to require heating and cooling because some people live in very aggressive climates. And so even if you were an off-gridder, you're still requiring resources that are taking more from the land that you're going to give back because you're a consumer. Humans are consumers. Anything that lives is a consumer, but there has to be balance. What is man's natural enemy? It's a virus. That's man's natural enemy. It's a virus that's misunderstood. Okay? We don't really have major natural enemies except for the fear that we put out there. That's our natural enemy when you think about it. But if you're gonna put a name to a natural enemy, you can say it's a virus. That's misunderstood because a virus could be Satan or it could be Jesus. Okay? But then let's reduce it down even further. Man is his own natural enemy. So you can't put man and have a bunch of man and woman and whatever procreating exponentially in places far off because they either won't survive or they're going to require a lot of infrastructure. And so that's why the New World Order is turning towards the green machine, less fossil fuels. You're going to see people leaving industries that were to save people, like the medical industry, like the first responders. Why do we save someone who actively destroys them? So now you're going to see instead of a buildup of the infrastructure of first responders and the medical holistic system, now you're going to see a decline based upon the psychology of the fear of the vaccines, the fear of death. And I'm telling you, it's freaking brilliant. It is brilliant beyond brilliant. It took me all of 5-6 years, whatever, to figure it out. Because of the amount of sides that I was taking, the amount of the people that I was attracting, you must give both sides of and that's what the whole thing is when I said dying by omission is not giving credibility to the other side is deceptive. Okay. And mischaracterizing the other argument is also deceptive by injecting your influence and biases. And so let's put that on that, let's take that hat and put it on the medical, holistic, and the mainstream media. If they actually said that salt was not only a catalyst to evolution, but a cure, okay? And we have 7 billion people who are all levels of deficits, who were never really accepting pain, who are in very important industries, it would topple the system if they actually took on my information and put it out there for the masses. It would topple the system. Okay? And so I think they have to make fun of me because because not everybody is prepared for heart attacks and strokes and feeling what they must feel to deal with their predisposition and eating all the food in the food supply. That would take up a lot of resources. If everybody in my town understood the JJ mentality, yeah, they'd be getting a bunch of salt, they'd be getting a bunch of food. Some people wouldn't understand what's going on and they would go to the medical system. So it would be worse than the virus pandemic if the medical holistic system also said and turned on its own heel and said, oh, well, we were mistaken. That wouldn't even come into play because they're supposed to be the ones that know everything, right? And so there's a lot of reasons why they would not sanction me. But they must give equal access to my information, but how you characterize my information is the other side of it, which is what I don't like. But if they said that, yes, you're very credible, if Dr. Phil said I was credible, it would turn the system upside down. And so he couldn't say I was credible. He couldn't. And not because not because he didn't agree. He probably understood where I was coming from, but he couldn't tell that to the masses. Not when you have 7 billion people not wanting to deal with pain, 7 billion people who are on so many diets, 7 billion people who are on a string of prescription drugs, and then to be told that salt really is a cure and it's a catalyst to evolution and you're not really supposed to die when everyone thinks you're supposed to die. I mean, holy crap. And so I understand why right now they would not sanction me or say anything about me in the mainstream, because we have 7 billion people who would go crazy. And so there must be a controlled decline. That's what the Georgia Guidestone says. I mean, I'm going to write that in my book. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. It's just that we must produce some kind of balance, just no different than when you have infection in your body, whether you cure it or you use an antibiotic, you're trying to control the growth because it's causing glitches in everything that you're doing. Okay? And so balance must be achieved, but you must understand both sides. But then the whole thing with death, people don't understand death. And so what they're afraid of is they're afraid of premature death. They're afraid of death that is not to their expectation. They're afraid to take something that they perceive as deadly and someone else called it life, and then they have no control over their life. And so that's really the issue, because let me tell you, even the ones that say that, oh, I'm not afraid to die, I'm going to go out there and hang out with a bunch of people and I'm going to do this, you're afraid to die because you want to take the vaccine, so you're afraid to die. Nobody out there, whether they take the vaccine or not take the vaccine, is not afraid of death. They all are. Okay? But they're just making fun of each other because they don't even know what life is, because they still believe people should die someday. So it's like, it's hard to explain what that phenomenon is, but it's I don't want to say hypocritical, because I don't think that people mean to be hypocritical. It's just the fact that people just, they've been programmed. 7 billion people have been programmed in a specific thought process. And you have 7 billion cells in your body that have been programmed, and then some are glitching. You got to get rid of the glitching cells in your body. You got to. I mean, your head is the mainframe. Your gut is the mainframe, and you have things going on in your body that you're like, oh my God, you have to deal with it. Some people get it surgically taken out. Other people take antibiotics. Some people take prescription drugs for it, same thing. Other people do the J juice mentality. But then what people are not talking about is you have to feed the viruses all food in the food supply. You have to feel the pain. You got to deal with symptoms. And you upgrade to the level of the environment. But it's like, that's so much to tell those that are so into being in a cured state, because they have so many bills to pay. They have social engagements and social capital that they can't afford to go and try to turn the tide. And, well, that's not a good analogy. They can't afford to go upend their whole life by taking another belief system. And and then understanding death for what it is. Just because death is a part of life to keep the balance doesn't mean that you, the person, has to die. But that's why we are a minority, because many people out there are going to accelerate their intentions. And all of you Jilly G's people that are listening to me, learn how to understand both sides of the story. And then realize that the vaccines aren't poisonous. Realize the vaccines aren't what's killing people. It's the fact that people are at deficits. The energy is going to cannibalize them. The virus is going to cannibalize them. The mRNA is just trying to stop the virus from doing more of the evolutionary aggressive energy, but not everybody can handle even that energy in the vaccine. But it's still a crapshoot. And so when you believe in death, no matter what, everything is a crapshoot. When your lifestyle is deadly on a progressive level, everything's a crapshoot. You'll be afraid of everything. And so if people are not ready to hear that they have to deal with pain and they don't have to die, and you have to feed your body all food in the food supply with no discrimination, no politicization of anything, the food, the water, the air is not poisonous. I mean, that's so much to take someone from 0 to 60 that you just have to kind of watch how everything pans out. And you just have to be like, yeah, we knew this was needed to happen, but it's no different than watching initially the waterfalls. It's no different when you're doing the waterfalls and watching things that were glitchy, go into the toilet and be washed away out of your earth, out of your body. And all those parasites are screaming in agony or screaming and protesting. Your body protests, sometimes when you want to change the programming. My dog protests when I try to give her a bath. Oh, she hates it. She hates it. But sometimes I think it's necessary because I think she has something on her that I can't even see. So I don't know. It could be viral. I don't know. So I'm not trying to poison her. So I got to let her go through, whatever process she goes through. It's not easy trying to keep the balance when there's so much overpopulation. And overpopulation doesn't mean just like there's just too much life. It also means the people that are in the population are taking more than they are giving back, and also causing issues in not only their own body, mind, and spirit, but everybody else's. And so what's a dignified way of scaling down the population? You give people perceived choices. And even though, they know they should die someday based upon the belief system, they don't realize that whatever choice you make, it's not going to matter, because your belief system still remains the same, and your lifestyle is not going to change too much because everyone wants to go back to normalcy. We're not in a normal world anymore. This is very different. Very, very, very different. We weren't around in the 1918 pandemic. Okay. We weren't around in the Spanish flu days. This is a whole new few generations that know about it, but never really experienced it for what it is. And so we have a lot of youth and a lot of older people and young people and whatever who who just have no idea what's in store for them. And so you can only give people the information, but you can't shove it down their throat, but you give them both sides of the story. But either way, you have to deal with pain, and you have to deal with viruses, and you have to eat all food in the food supply, and salt is not your enemy. And get that across to someone who has such a great relationship with their doctor. So anyway, so I'm in the process now of rewriting my introduction, because my introduction is going to then finally give me the organization of which is going to come first. Am I going to talk about the Georgia Guidestones first? Am I going to talk about the Trinity, the religions and politics and science, and then the demigod, God, and then also the pantheon? I mean, it's like, do I talk about the chicken or the egg first? That's really what I'm struggling with at this point, is how am I going to have a cohesive flow in this book, and which do I start first, the chicken or the egg? And so that's the creative process. But I need to hear myself talk about this, because every type of learning is hearing, seeing, studying, sleeping, pooping, and all five senses have to be involved, must be involved for it to be part of you, the information to be part of you. And so that's why I do the videos I do every single freaking day, tired or not tired. I can't see myself throw myself on the couch if I'm not super tired. If I'm like not super tired, I'm just kind of chill and watching anything and knowing that I have work to do. Once I get this book done, then I'll figure out my next move. But right now, this is like all consuming. But thankfully my dog is relatively okay. My husband is doing his thing. And so I have the time and the space and finally the balance to just attack it the way I need to attack it. And so thank you, y'all, for listening and being that sounding board. And we'll get this book done, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be awesome. All right, bye.